What an interesting start to our Facebook Live video, but okay.
He was talking to me, Terry.
I was talking to you too.
All right, it is 6 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and call to order the regular meeting of the City Council for May 18th, 2020. Invocation and Pledge of Allegiance will be led by City Clerk Timmons today.
And bow our heads. Father God, we come to you tonight as we prepare to do the city's business. Lord, I ask that you be a compass of guidance for our local, our state, and our federal leaders. I pray that you lead us all to a speedy and safe resolution as we power through this pandemic. I also ask that you put a hedge of protection around those on the front lines. Lord, we thank you for everything that you have done and everything that you will do. We pray all these things in Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
Of
of the United States of America
and to the republic
And
for
to
which
the
it
republic for which it
one nation,
stands
One nation,
one nation
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty,
with liberty and justice for
justice
all.
for all.
Thank you for that. The first item of business today is approval of the May 4th minutes. Y'all have received a copy of that. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
It's offered.
second,
Second,
I have a motion from, it looked like Councilmember Vapurzian, seconded by Councilmember Williams. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, yes.
yes,
yes,
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Madam City Clerk, do we have any public comment cards?
Yes, sir, we do have a public comment card. It is regarding agenda item 1001.
Okay.
It's from Gib.
Okay, we will get to that then when we get to the second reading ordinance 1001. At this time, normally we'd have the financial statement review. I think I got emailed a copy. Let me see here. I think I got emailed a copy of this only in the last 30 minutes or so. At this time, I think Ms. Vega, I believe, is prepared to give the financials, but I think I'd recommend that we table this until the next meeting so we've had a chance to look at the financials before we accept them. If that's acceptable with the City Council, I'd entertain a motion to table the financial statement until the first meeting in June.
It's offered.
I had a motion and second to table that. Is there any discussion on that matter? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
yes,
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask, I kind of fell out of the meeting there. What was the reason why we didn't have the financials?
I am bringing Ms. Vega in for that. Ms. Vega, we should be able to hear you now.
Okay, so we did not, with the move, we lost internet and the server for most of 2 weeks and on 2 separate weeks, but this past week, we did not get it back throughout Monday through Thursday. We didn't get it back until almost noon on Thursday. And my team was not able to get their part done so that I could get my part done. And we tried really, really hard. And like you said, I just sent it to him probably 45 minutes ago.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Also, I'm going through trying to keep everyone muted unless you're talking, so keep that in mind. Thank you, Ms. Vega. Okay, at this point, then we are ready for a procedural motion. I'd entertain a motion to have all ordinances and resolutions read by title only.
So offered.
Second.
I've got a motion from Councilmember Gardner, second by Councilmember Saunders, to have all ordinances and resolutions read by title only. Is there any discussion on that matter? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
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 All opposed say no. Motion carries. At this point, we are moving on to unfinished business. We have the second reading of ordinance 1001, amending the Maumelle Land Use Plan. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled ordinance number 1001, an ordinance amending the Maumelle Land Use Plan and map and for other purposes.
All right, I believe we do have a public comment card on that from Mr. Carpenter. If you would go ahead and read that, please, Ms. Timmons.
Yes, sir. My name is Gib Carpenter. I'm reading the public comment card. I'm not Gib Carpenter. My name is Gib Carpenter, and I live at 222 Mountain Terrace Circle, and I am once again representing Maumelle Country Club. I would like to begin by correcting some misinformation provided by the applicant's representative. Cart path road crossing at Chenal and Pleasant Valley golf courses are via tunnel under active roads. The closest at-grade cart path crossing at the Country Club of Arkansas is 250 yards away from the clubhouse. The proposed path to the subject property is directly adjacent to our pro shop and cart staging area. Speaking of the proposed path, we still have not received any detailed proposal from the applicant, and they appear to be satisfied that they can simply power through this matter, whether we like it or not. They have repeatedly mentioned best use. Best use for who? Certainly best for the realtor. It has been reported that CAW will receive no benefit to their bottom line. As far as the taxpayers, the proceeds of that property is a pebble in the ocean and would relieve less than 2 months of the $20.59 consolidation surcharge. As far as the best for the city, I will remind you that that Maumelle receives $2 for every $100 the club charges for green fees, car rentals, golf tournaments, and corporate events, all of which are in jeopardy if we cannot provide a safe and pleasant environment for those activities. Finally, to what should be obvious, the subject property is zoned open space, completely surrounded 360 degrees with property that is zoned open space. And the only adjacent property owner vehemently opposes this rezoning. Thank you for your careful consideration of our concerns.
Thank you for that. Is there any discussion or debate at this time on ordinance 1001? Councilmember Scott?
Yes, I have a couple of items that I would like to open for discussion. Actually, 3 items. I asked that someone from the fire department weigh in, see if there was adequate ingress and egress to that property in the event that it developed. Did you have someone lined up for that, Mr. Mayor?
I am not seeing someone there, and so I think I talked about that. I'm not sure. I apologize for that. I can be sure that there will be someone in the fire department at the next meeting. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. I've got a couple of other things. If this property is not, I believe it's Central Arkansas Water that's selling the property to the developer. If the property does not sell to the developer, have there been other offers for that property? And at what cost?
I have I have Mr. Bingman, if you'd like to bring him in, and I believe he's a representative of both the seller and the applicant.
I would just be curious to know if there were other offers on the table that had not been disclosed.
Mr. Bingman, I am bringing you in as a panelist. I will consider that question posed to you. I have unmuted you.
So I would not say officially there are other offers on the table. I can tell you in lieu of the newspaper article that was out last week about this topic, that I have had multiple phone calls of people that wanted to develop this land, not realizing that it was already under contract with another developer. So there is definitely interest in the rezoning and making this into the development that we're trying to make.
So, sir, as far as you know, there has not been an offer by an individual or by the country club itself for that property?
There were offers made from the country club a while back last year that were rejected by CAW. And there is a contract, a real estate contract is executed and in place for a developer to develop this once it's rezoned.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, may I continue, or did someone else want to say something first?
I can wait.
You can go ahead.
Okay.
Councilmember Scott.
I'll have some, but you're on a roll. Go ahead, Marion.
Okay. I'd like for our city attorney, Ms. Krebs, to repeat the criteria that she stated last time. I believe it was 94-492 and 54-79. If you would do that for us, please.
Sure. 94-492 is where I'll start. It's titled Preservation of Open Space. Open space areas shall be maintained so that their use and enjoyment as open space are not diminished or destroyed. Open space areas may be owned, preserved, and maintained as required by this section by any of the following mechanisms or combination of such mechanisms. The first is dedication of open space to the city or an appropriate public agency, if there is a public agency willing to accept the dedication. Number two, common ownership of the open space by the residents association, which assumes full responsibility for maintenance. Or three, as a restricted private ownership, which shall prevent development and or subsequent subdivision of the open space land and provide for maintenance. Okay, and on the criteria, the guidelines to be used in determining when to amend the land use plan. This is 54-79. Paragraph 7 states, the Planning Commission and the City Council will review the proposal and base their decision using the following guidelines. So these are our 4 guidelines for making this decision. A, other changes that have occurred in the neighborhood since the land use plan was adopted or the latest amendment was enacted. And as we mentioned last time, that was 2014, so about 6 years ago. B, whether these changes resulted in a change to the neighborhood's character sufficiently to justify the proposed land use plan change. C, issues and concerns raised by the neighborhood when submitted with sufficient specificity to enable the commission or city council to respond to the issues. And 4, or D, other substantial or technical evidence that any proponent or opponent of the proposed change submits.
Okay, the reason I asked our city attorney to reread those was because in really studying them, I wonder if we have the right to make this change. And this is just a discussion point for the council. And I would like for others to weigh in on that, given this criteria. I think the change to the property has been that the water company building was torn down. On the other hand, the neighborhood, it seems to me, since it's 100% surrounded by the country club, that's the neighborhood that would be affected as opposed to residential areas beyond the boundaries of the country club. And of course, the issues of concern by the local residents, that would be the members of the country club. Although they are not residents or homeowners, they're parties of interest in that development. And I believe the country club's been there for about 50 years. So any other substantial changes to that area besides the tearing down of that building have not taken place. And I'm not making it one way or the other. I'm asking if we feel that's enough to make a change from open space to some other land use. Other members of the council.
Thank you, Councilmember Scott. Did I see Councilmember Gardner with his hand up there?
You can come back to me. Go to Steve or Michael.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Mosley? Hang on, let me unmute you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've been looking at those items in the city code also, same ones that Alderman Scott's been looking at here. And I have some of the same concerns she does here, especially that 7A and 7B, talking about the other changes that have occurred. And basically that neighborhood is unchanged. I don't see that other than that water plant being torn down, there's been no changes. It's not like over there at the Counts Massey extension where we completed that and completed an interchange where maybe rezoning of some land along there is appropriate for commercial and that sort of thing. Nothing's really changed around the country club. And that 7B, the word justify really stands out to me. It says whether these changes, which I don't see that there really have been any, whether these changes resulted in a change to the neighborhood's character sufficiently to justify the proposed land use plan change. In other words, it looks like the onus is on us to justify, to find a way to justify to change this zoning as opposed to the other way around. So I've got some of the same concerns as Ms. Scott, and then back over there on that those open space, talking about that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about 94-491. I think Ms. Scott had her read 94-492, and that one there talks about that open space district has been designed for various reasons, and it seems the paragraph seems to say we shouldn't take it lightly to rezone open space. In other words, it's been put there and you can't really get it back if you zone it. And that it was set up in specific ways. It would be interesting to know which was there first, the water plant or the golf course. But anyway, those items really stand out at me. And I think everybody on the council, if you haven't looked at these items, to really study these before we vote, because especially those four items in 5479, those really lay out how we're supposed to come to a decision on this. And it doesn't mention weighing in what's best for city revenue or things like that. So anyway, I wanted to make those points. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Councilmember Tierney was next.
Yeah, it's been mentioned a couple of times about the price of the offer that's been made. Also that the Maumelle Country Club had made an offer previously. I'd like to know two things about that. One, how much lower was that in comparison to the offer that Central Arkansas Water did accept? And then two, should we vote to leave the ordinance the way it is right now, not make the land use change, is that still a consideration that Central Arkansas Water may go back and accept that offer?
So you're wanting to know what offer the country club, how much the country club offered to pay?
Well, I'm
And
trying to
then-
know how far apart they were from what they were offered and what they accepted. I mean, were they close? Were they far apart? And I'm trying to figure out if this is something, if this is voted to stay open territory, if it's something that Maumelle Water, I keep trying to say Maumelle Water, but Maumelle Country Club, would possibly have a chance to obtain this property from Central Arkansas Water.
Go ahead and bring in Mr. Bingman to decide whether he'd like to answer that question or not. Mr. Bingman, you are unmuted.
So we've got a piece of property of 4 acres that's appraised recently at $295,000. I would only share this because this is a public entity. The utility company it is, and all of their information and all their dealings are basically made available to the public. So this property is under contract for $250,000. It is my understanding that the country club last year offered to pay $25,000.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bingman. Next up, I had Council Member Gardner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of going back to what City Attorney Krebs mentioned, I was just wondering, it seems like one of the options for open space was that we mentioned last time, one of the allowable uses was the ability to construct a water treatment plant, or I guess maybe a municipal building, or not building, but municipal services, or an entity that provided services. So I was just wondering if that was zoned open space simply because I don't know if that was the only thing available at the time when they built the water treatment plant, but it seems like the definitions of open space that we've been talking about generally refer to parks, nature areas, things like that. And yet the site had a wastewater treatment plant on it. So, I mean, to me, that seems like it's a change in the neighborhood, since I know some of those roads in Osage Falls backed up to that, and they used to look at a wastewater treatment plant, and now it's gone. It's open space. So I don't know if that qualifies as a reasoning for to have a change in the neighborhood. But I was mainly just curious about, we had a wastewater treatment plant utilizing open space, and we're talking about trying to preserve it. Yet it used to be a wastewater treatment plant. And so I don't know if I have a question or if that's just more of a comment, but I just wondered if that's maybe where the only spot that a wastewater treatment plant would fit. I don't know how our code reads as far as where that would be allowed. So
just to address that for a moment, there are a number of conditional uses listed for open space. And one of those is public utility buildings and facilities, including units for residential emergency personnel when necessary for serving the surrounding area, provided no public business office and no repair or storage facility or sewer treatment plant are built. That's okay. That particular section. So it does allow for public utility uses.
And if a public utility wanted to come along and build somewhere else, what would that have to be zoned? And I may be reaching here. I'm curious, if we're talking about open space, it was a wastewater plant. So I'm wondering what the correct zoning would be for that, or if that's the only zoning that we have. We have to call a spot open space if it's going to be a utility.
I believe there's also, it mentions that it is the intent of this district to enhance the natural conditions of open space and to reduce the disproportionate costs of providing public facilities. I think that it is allowed in open space because of the public nature. I mean, obviously I wasn't here when it was enacted, but that's just my interpretation.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Missy, I was just wondering when you were talking, that you, number one was other changes in the neighborhood. And you mentioned 2014. Is that when the treatment plant was no longer in use, or when it was torn down? Is that the other changes in the neighborhood?
No, that's just the date that it says. Let me read that through so it makes sense. Other changes that have occurred in the neighborhood since the land use plan was adopted or the latest amendment was enacted.
Oh, okay. And so that was in.
Yeah, our land use plan, and this is just from checking the planning and zoning website. The latest version of our land use plan was adopted, it looks like, in 2014.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. I was a little confused on that. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Scott, a minute ago, I think I demoted you to an attendee. So if you were raising your hand or anything at that time, I didn't get a chance to see it.
That's all right. Hurt my feeling.
Okay. I was aiming for Mr. Bingman. Is there any further discussion on this?
Mr. Mayor,
Oh.
I would just like to say thank you to the council for weighing this so carefully. I think it's pretty important. I know it's important to the people of the country club. I know it's important to development of the city. There are two sides to this, and I really hope that I wish we could come up with something definitive to help us make our decision, but the discussion is good. Thank you.
Councilmember Mosley, I believe I saw your hand up.
Yes, sir. I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in on this if you had an opinion you'd like to express.
Thank you.
Yeah, do you have an opinion on this, Mr. Mayor?
Are you just speaking generally?
Well,
rezoning?
specifically, generally, or anything you'd like to share with us?
Well, I tell you, I'd certainly rather see the type of residential issues that we're talking about, that are being talked about there, as opposed to them basically converting that back into utility use. And I've heard different suggestions about what that property might be used for if it has to remain open space. My guidance on this would be that we're looking at the zoning issue, and I think that if we were looking at any particular plan of residential subdivision, that we'd have to really look at the ingress and egress to make sure that it's done safely in a way that doesn't interfere. It's my opinion my personal opinion that stage to discuss the ingress and egress is when we've got a plan laid out in front of us. But I have stopped short of taking a position on this until I've heard everyone out. And it seems like every meeting we hear more information, and it was that way in the Planning Commission, and we continue to hear more information. So I'm kind of in the same boat as everyone else right now, and just exploring what the options are. But thank you for that opportunity, Mr. Mosley.
Yeah, I'll mention a couple other things here. As far as the effects on the neighborhood by the rezoning, we would probably see more traffic on Club Manor. And if there was not some agreement for something different than the current easement that goes in there, it would certainly probably disrupt the normal proceedings of the golf course, which has been there for, I don't know, 45, 50 years. So I think we need to consider that. And and as you may have mentioned, it would be nice if there was some agreement between the neighboring folks, which is the country club and the entity wanting to rezone, if there was some agreement on that. But right now there is not, so it makes the task more difficult. But I would very much encourage everybody to read those sections we discussed tonight. I think those are very important, that we use those as guidelines in our final decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional discussion? Councilmember Gardner?
Yes, sir. I was just going to ask if we had anybody from the country club available that wanted to address anything tonight. Was there anything?
Well, what I've told them, if you have questions, I'm happy to bring them in and do that. But So if you want to address some questions,
Well,
I have.
I don't have any particular questions, no, sir. I just wondered if there was any outstanding questions that anybody else had, just to give some.
I do have
someone
Mr. Carpenter here on this issue, Mr. Mark Bingman, and Mr. Eric Holloway, all available if there's any questions. I'll take the silence as a no. And if there's no further discussion, I don't see any hands up, no one waving at me, then this will be on third reading at the next city council meeting. All right, Madam City Clerk, if we could please have the second reading of ordinance 1002, amending the Maumelle zoning map.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled ordinance number 1002, an ordinance amending the Maumelle zoning map and for other purposes.
All right, this is the companion ordinance for the land use plan, still dealing with that same property. Is there any discussion, deliberation, debate on this issue? Seeing none, last call, we will move on. Yes,
I do
sir,
have
Councilmember Mosley.
one quick comment. Under the whereases, this is a different whereas than the previous ordinance. It says, whereas the city council finds that the proposed amendment map will not adversely affect the community. That's something we'll need to consider in that, I think. In other words, will this rezoning adversely affect the surrounding community, which would be the country club and maybe Club Manor and the residents around there. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, we will move on to the second reading of ordinance 1007, providing retirement benefits for the city attorney. Madam City Clerk Treasurer, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled ordinance number 1002. My apologies. Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, ordinance to be entitled ordinance number 1007, an ordinance providing for the retirement benefits in accordance with section 24-12-120 of the Arkansas Code for the elected officials, the elected positions of the city attorney of the City of Maumelle and for other purposes.
Thank you. Y'all may recall that this is the same that is already in place for the mayor and city clerk treasurer by state law. Those are automatic. And then on, but the city attorneys does require a ordinance to be passed. Is there any discussion or deliberation on this issue?
I've got a question.
Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, under item C on the second page, it says, I was just reading through this very carefully, and it said the city attorney may continue to practice law during his or her term of office. I thought we had gone to a full-time city attorney.
That is correct.
Is that sentence accurate? Should that still be in there?
So this actually was passed, I want to say in mid 2012, and I was paying attention because both you and I were running for city council at about that time. And it was one of the provisions that was added back in. There's nothing in the city, and let me do my best to repeat what the city council discussed back in 2012. But the issue then was that there was no prohibition against a mayor or city clerk from holding outside employment. And so someone brought up, well, if that is the case for those two offices, why are you specifically targeting the city attorney as not being able to run business. And so the council then changed that to just the provision that you just read, but it is a full-time position.
I almost find that more confusing. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, so, and I remember, here's what I was thinking back when I was in 2012. I was like, well, they should just withdraw all of section C, and then that would put it in line with mayor and city clerk, and that the code remains silent on that issue. And so that's something that we can address. That's probably a different, we could run a different ordinance or amend that, but then this ordinance wouldn't really be limited to just providing retirement benefits. It'd be changing that scope. And then I'd have to ask the city attorney, but I think in 2012, that sort of change wouldn't have gone into effect until the beginning of the next term, if memory serves. But just something to think about.
Okay. Well, we need to, I think to avoid confusion, we either need to have it a full-time position or not. And I was thinking we'd all agree to be a full-time position and the salaries commensurate with a full-time as I understand it. So anyway, that's all I've got. But yes, this is addressing the retirement package and not the full-time. So we'll address that at another time.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Gardner.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in reference to what Mr. Mosley was discussing. One of the things that we ran into on the salary committee was finding good comparables for the position of city attorney, because so many of our peers actually use, that they maintain their practice. So they may have a full-time city attorney, but they also still maintain a private practice. And I'm kind of with the mayor. I'm not sure why that section is there. And I wouldn't see any reason that we couldn't take that out later so that it's not conflicting with anything. But that's one of the reasons maybe that it was left in, is because many attorneys in other cities do keep their private practice going while serving as city attorney. So just wanted to mention that. Maybe that's why that was put in there.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on ordinance 1007, providing retirement benefits for the city attorney? Seeing none, we will move on to new business. That's the Civil Service Commission appointments. Just to reiterate, we have 2 vacancies right now. The first one is created by the expiration of the term by Mr. Doug Coney, who has filled in that seat for the last several years. Thank you to Mr. Coney if he's listening out there for his service, but he has elected to not reapply for that position. The next position is position 3 that expires in 2022, and that vacancy is being filled by the resignation of Mr. Ray Schwenkhart when he resigned and moved out of the city. What we'll go ahead and do at this point is bring in the applicants. Typically in the past, we've had the opportunity to ask the applicants to kindly leave the room so that none of them were, had extra time to respond to questions. That isn't very practical in the current situation. So just keep that in mind, that the person that goes first won't have the advantage of having heard all the questions beforehand. But what we'll go ahead and do is take them in the order that they are on the council packet, which means that Mr. Bynum Matthews is first. I am promoting him to the panelist and unmuting him. Mr. Matthews, would you like to introduce yourself to the city council?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, Bynum Matthews. I'm assuming you all have had a chance to look at my resume that I submitted to Ms. Timms. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's the council packet. It was in the council packet.
Okay. How do we want to do this? Would you like me to start and kind of walk through that? Do y'all have questions you'd like to ask to start, or how do you?
If you have anything that you'd like to introduce or tell the city council about yourself, we can do that first, and then we'll provide opportunity for the city council to ask questions following
no
that.
problem. I can just kind of walk you through some of the stuff on my resume there. As you can see, I've had various employment over the last 25 years, everything from teaching tax class to software development, which is what I currently do. None of that stuff is necessarily pertinent to this position. What I would say is pertinent is the fact that I currently supervise 25 people. You know, all those people want a raise and a promotion, which is great, you know, to want to advance your career. But I'm very well acquainted with having limited resources. Our corporation has limited resources, just like a city does. And we've got to, you know, give those out in an unbiased fashion and a fair fashion. I'm, you know, very well acquainted with those types of conversations, those types of situations. The other thing I would point out at the end of the resume, the volunteer activities. So I've lived in Maumelle 26 years. I've tried to advance the city as much as possible by everything from being a micro soccer coach to actually coaching at the high school and on a volunteer basis when they didn't have money to hire coaches. I also served as a volunteer fireman out here for 15 years. So I've tried through the years to do the best I can to help Maumelle. So questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is there any questions from the city council? Mr. Councilmember Tierney.
Yes. Thank you for applying, Mr. Matthews. Got a quick question for you. One, what do you consider to be the primary duty of the Civil Service Commission? And then two, what skills do you think make you best qualified to fulfill those?
Okay. So what I just mentioned, I think, makes me uniquely qualified with having to deal with these types of situations all the time in my work, as well as being a volunteer fireman. I don't know how familiar you guys are with how that works, but the volunteers out here have the same training any fireman in Arkansas has. So I've taken firefighter 1, firefighter 2, driver operator, first responder. I've taken all those fire service exams. So I understand what these people go through, you know, when they're taking those exams and trying to be certified and trying to get promotions. I would say the main purpose of this commission, in my opinion, would be to advance those people fairly and in an unbiased fashion.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Is there any additional questions? Go ahead, and if there are any.
I've got a quick question.
Go for it.
I noticed Mr. Matthews has an accounting degree, an MBA in finance, and a CPA. Am I reading that correctly? That's quite a bit.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
All right. Okay. I guess that's all I've got. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your time very much.
Thank you. Were there any additional questions for Mr. Matthews? Okay, Mr. Matthews, you are off the hook for the time being. The next individual is Sheila Sharpe. Let me roll her on in here. Ms. Sharpe, I have unmuted you. If you'd like to take a minute and introduce yourself to the City Council, you're free to do so.
I will. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have been retired since about the fall of 2018, and I spent over 40 years in state government public service. I have a master's degree in public administration. My background is in management and administration, state budget finance, human resources, among a few things. I've been retired almost 2 years, and I've been looking for an opportunity to volunteer where I could use my skills and my passion for human resources and public service. In my last role as the director of Arkansas Community Correction, I was a certified law enforcement officer myself and responsible for an agency of over 1,100 employees and almost 400 certified law enforcement officers. So I do understand the great responsibility for the lives of these officers, and that their integrity must be above reproach, and that they must have firm, fair, and consistent rules and regulations in order for them to succeed. I don't know a lot about the operations of Maumelle government. I have been here for 15 years. I mean, I understand the structure. So I'm sort of a blank slate as it comes to city government. But I do understand what the need for having an opportunity for officers and even their administrators to have a commission that can hear those grievances from time to time and to make sure that the procedures are firm, fair, and consistent. I think I might have answered that first question you had a while ago.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did anyone have any questions? I don't see any. It looks like you answered some of those questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we will go ahead and move on to Mr. Gary Washroom. Let me. Mr. Washroom, we can see you, and I believe I've unmuted you. If you'd like to take a minute and introduce yourself to the City Council, you're free to do so.
Well, first, I want to apologize for the glare coming off the forehead, but that's just the way it is at 50 plus years old, I guess. So I've had it for a long time. My name's Gary Washroom. I have lived in Maumelle with my wife for approximately 20 years. We moved out here the first time in '96. Was out of the city for a few years and had been back for about 8 years now. Some of you may know that I was on the Planning Commission in different positions, even chairman at one point in time, for a total of approximately 10 years, and had tried to be involved in the city of Maumelle as much as possible. Personally, I have, you will see from my resume, I have an MBA and then also a degree in international economics. I had gone back to school and became a nurse to try to help the public and serve people. And within that, I worked in the ER and ICU and became a nurse practitioner. So from that standpoint, I'm a public service kind of person, have tried to do everything I can here in Maumelle for the time being that I have lived here. And from the standpoint of the police and the fire department, I can't say that I know how the departments work or how they run. However, from a public servant, if you will, I do have an appreciation from that. And even years ago, when I was on the Planning Commission, I had considered trying to apply for an open position, but based on being on the Planning Commission and then also some of the other duties that I had and at work, it just wasn't a good timing for me. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. From what I have heard, there are some outstanding candidates that's involved in this process. So regardless of who gets picked, I do believe that the positions will be filled with wonderful candidates.
Thank you, Mr. Washroom. Is there any questions at this time? I do not see any. Again, thank you, Mr. Washroom. Let me do the little dance and bring in Mr. Greg Northern.
All right.
Mr.
we
Northern,
ready?
I believe I have you unmuted now. If you'd like to take a minute and introduce yourself to the city council, you're free to do so.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. Appreciate the opportunity to be interviewed by you. I had the benefit of going last, so appreciate whoever came with the agenda. Tina, I owe you a Coke. Some of the comments already made, I was going to say the same as Mr. Washroom that just indicated. You got a great group of panelists. So I know you have applicants. So I know you have a difficult decision ahead of you. The reason I am applying for this position is I do believe I have the professional experience to bring assistance to our Civil Service Commission. My background is I am an attorney. I practice in a private firm in Little Rock. It's mid-sized, one of those with 4 or 5 names in it. So you wouldn't know it if you heard it, most likely. The city attorney might have heard of it. But we primarily practice in labor and employment defense, which means we represent employers, both public and private. We represent several municipalities, including some police departments around the state. And I've had experience defending against claims of discrimination, unfair labor practice, collective bargaining agreement issues, unfair disciplines, wrongful terminations. Those things are part of my daily repertoire at work. And not to mention burgeoning issues such as medical marijuana in Arkansas and what that means, and safety issues and all sorts of things that my day-to-day work, I think I can bring to the city and hopefully assist in, again, furthering the mission statement of the commission, which is to ensure the equitable treatment of all of our police and fire departments to make sure that they're being treated fairly, as was stated by Mr. Matthews. And I think that's a critical role. So I hope you select me. If not, been in Maumelle for about 9 years. I'm raising 2 children with my wife. We live down here in Riverland subdivision, and we'll be around for many years. So hope to see you all one way or another.
Thank you, Mr. Northern. Are there any questions from the city council? I do not see any. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Again, before we get to the vote, I want to thank all 4 applicants. As difficult of a decision as the council has to make, it's refreshing, both for the city and for our uniformed personnel, to know that we have so many qualified applicants that it's a real head scratcher. Just a reminder to the city council, what we'll be doing first is making the appointment to position 1. That is the longer term that will effectively expire in 5 years from now. In a moment, we will ask the city clerk to perform a roll call vote where you will choose which of the 4 applicants you want. If there's runoffs, we're prepared for multiple votes. After the position 1 is filled, we will repeat that process for position 3. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns about that process?
Are we going by numbers or names?
Names.
Okay, thank you.
Names, and just I'll go through those names in the order that they just spoke. It was Bynum Matthews went first, Sheila Sharpe went second, Gary Washroom went third, and Gregory Northern went fourth. So what we have now is the vote to fill position 1 of the Civil Service Commission expiring 2025. Madam City Clerk, roll call vote, please.
I want to let the council know that I will not be going in the order that I normally do. So please listen for your name and speak clearly. Councilmember Williams, who's your vote for this first round?
Sheila Sharpe.
Councilmember Holt. Who is your top pick? He's muted. His button is muted.
There we go. I think I've got him unmuted. Mr. Holt.
Sheila Sharpe.
Councilmember Papasan.
Ms. Sharpe.
Councilmember Tierney.
Ms. Sharpe.
Councilmember Scott.
Ms. Sharpe.
Councilmember Gardner.
Greg Northern.
Councilmember Mosley,
Mr. Northern,
Councilmember Saunders,
Sheila Sharpe.
Ms. Sharpe wins
Thank you.
majority.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sharpe, you are hereby appointed to position 1. I am sure you will be hearing from HR here very soon, as well as the chairman, Mr. Billy Harrington, who I know is listening in right here. Thank you. That went smoothly. So we can go ahead and look to fill position 3. That's the term that expires in 2 years. Please do not vote for Ms. Sharpe for that position. Madam City Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Mosley,
who is that?
who's your next topic? Mosley, who's your
Okay,
next?
Mr. Northern.
And Councilmember Tierney, who's your next topic?
Mr. Northern.
Councilmember Gardner,
Greg Northern.
Councilmember Vapurzian,
Greg Northern.
Councilmember Scott,
Mr. Northern,
Councilmember Holt,
Oh, let me unmute. Mr. Holt, you should be unmuted now.
Mr. Northern.
Councilmember Williams,
Mr. Northern.
Councilmember Saunders.
Greg Northern.
I think it's unanimous, Mr. Northern.
Thank you very much. Mr. Northern, you should be contacted by Human Resources and Mr. Billy Harrington. Congratulations to both of y'all. The 2 applicants who weren't selected, please don't take that personally. Thank you for applying, and please always be on the lookout for other ways that you can get involved. We love folks that are getting involved. Right, the next order of business is Resolution 2020-12, acknowledging and approving terms of a Title VI program. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumelle, Pulaski County, Arkansas, resolution number 2020-12. A resolution acknowledging and approving the terms of the Title VI program benefiting the Senior Citizens Transportation Assistance Program, and authorizing the mayor to execute an applicable program documents and for other purposes.
Thank you very much. Ms. Nicole Vogler is here. If there are any questions for her, basically this is, we have to do this periodically. You should see a memo in there from Ms. Vogler. We basically do this every 3 years, and it has to do with the grant program for transportation. Madam City Attorney, did you have anything to add to that?
I don't believe I do. It's just the standard renewal that we've done in years past.
Motion to approve resolution 2020-12.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that? Councilmember Scott?
yeah, I was recently contacted by a realtor outside of the city, and she asked me if I could give her some highlights of Maumelle. And the very first thing that popped into my mind was the wonderful transportation system that we offer to our seniors. And she is using that now in her real estate ads for properties in the city.
Oh,
Thank you. Councilmember Mosley, did I see your hand up there?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, there's a lot of paperwork there. Are there any strings attached to this? Is there anything we have to monitor or keep track of, any paperwork or anything?
There's no federal money without strings attached, Mr. Mosley. No federal
Is
money
that, is
without
that for
strings.
Ms. Vogler or for me?
Either anybody.
I'll let Nicole go first.
Let me go ahead and move her in as a panelist then. Ms. Vogler, I believe I have you unmuted now.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the mayor, Clerk Tina Timmons, our city attorney, Ms. Krebs. This is a lengthy document, but it is a document for non-discrimination. And we are required through this program to place this in the lobby of the senior center. We also place it in all of the city vehicles for the program, and we take this to heart. We don't ever want to discriminate anyone, of course. And so, you know, there are documents in place, but to me, they're common sense documents that you would want to follow anyway.
Thank you. Madam City Attorney, did you want to add something to that, or does that?
Sure. Well, I think that pretty well covers it, but you know, I hope you look through the items that are in the packet. I had, you know, since this was just new to me, sent some emails back and forth with Ms. Vogler on how we have handled the complaint process, if we've had the documents translated into Spanish, which we're required to do. And she is on it, as always, and was able to provide me with those assurances and detailed descriptions of how they've complied with all those requirements. So yes, there are a number of requirements, but they do take those seriously and have implemented their requirements.
Thank you very much. Was there any additional questions, comments, concerns, deliberation? Seeing none, I believe we have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2020-12. Last call for discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor, please make sure you are unmuted and say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. Motion carries. With that, that concludes new business. Thank you, Ms. Vogler. I did want to talk about a few things under mayor's comments briefly. COVID-19, and of course, I'm free to answer any questions about what we have going on after that. Our swimming pool is currently slated to open under the governor's and the Department of Health's restrictions and guidelines on May 23rd. That would be this Saturday. That is the same time frame that we would have normally opened. I've been over at Parks and Rec, and we've been going through a whole lot to make sure that we're able to adhere and enforce the state's directives regarding pools. We hope to release more information this week about classes, scheduling, and all of that sort of stuff. We went ahead and opened up the outdoor basketball courts on Thursday. Indoor courts remain closed pursuant to the directives on gyms. And again, I'm happy to address any questions or hear comments if there are any on that topic. But if I don't see any, I wanted to point out C-Click Fix. We did that launch this week. If you haven't had a chance and you have a smartphone, download the C-Click Fix app. I've used it myself on my commute to work. Sometimes I've taken a picture of a squirrel and then reported it, and I did so anonymously. I was just curious how quick the roadkill would be picked up, and Animal Services had that closed out within 30 minutes. Obviously, they're not all going to be that quick fixes, potholes or street lights out. We've had a total of, I want to say, 84 items reported. A large number of those are street lights, but please start using that, direct people to that. Not only does it notify the appropriate departments, but it allows us and creates the back end system for us to monitor and keep up with all of those requests. I've had people sometimes call me or send me a text message on an issue, and I've created the ticket in C-Click Fixes, where I'm finding that's a very efficient way for us to keep up with that and get feedback as it's going on. So y'all, if you have constituents that don't want to do it, or they just call you and you want to open up that ticket, you can do it publicly or anonymously, however you want. And that'll still allow you to monitor and track that. We are working out a few kinks, so bear with us if you see something get assigned to 4 different people before it lands on the right person, but I think it's working pretty good so far. I wanted to give a heads up on Memorial Day ceremonies. The Memorial Day ceremonies, and perhaps Councilmember Saunders knows just how much work goes into planning events like this. I was talking with Miss Judy Keller, who does a lot of the heavy lifting for this event, a number of weeks ago, and trying to determine whether or not we'd be able to proceed, what the directives would say. We eventually found that the Field of Flags wasn't going to be available at that time. And so we shifted gears, and we will not be holding a live Memorial Day ceremony at the pavilion or at the memorial itself. We have Rachel Hall's been working hard on a video. Perhaps you've seen some of the calls and requests for people giving their stories. We have a video that we've put together. And of course, the memorial is open if you'd like to go down there and pay your respects personally. It's an awkward time. If we were doing it again under these conditions, we might try and put something together, but just due to the amount of time it took to schedule it and where we thought we were headed at that time, we had to make the call and shift gears. I also wanted to draw your attention to 2 things in the FYI. The first is the East-West North Pulaski Connector Study. Take a look at that if you're interested in that. It doesn't directly impact Maumelle, but if you want to keep up with what's going on transportation wise in the county, you may want to be looped in on that. And then of course, I've included a proclamation declaring it Municipal Clerks Week. And so I'd like to take a minute to thank Ms. Timmons for her hard work, and of course the Deputy City Clerk for her continued efforts. So thank you very much. Enjoy the week. Have a party.
Thank you.
And with that, that concludes Mayor's comments. Are there any council member comments?
Yes.
Council member Saunders.
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned at the last time we met in the council chambers, you made a comment that you had received some information in the form of a suggestion or something about the intersection of Club Manor and South Odom. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Sure, and I can send that to y'all, and I've postponed giving it to you because the idea was to bring the city engineer in and have him kind of talk about and make a presentation on all the different options, and that I think would be a little bit difficult right now to do it virtually.
No, I'm not pushing. Yeah, I just don't want it to fall through the cracks. That's all.
It won't fall through the cracks. If y'all like, I can email out that, or would you rather wait and have the presentation? I can just email it to everyone.
I just soon have the presentation, but that's not up to me alone. So.
Yeah, we could do the presentation virtually. I just think it would be a lot more digestible in person at a council meeting. That unfortunately may take a little while. So I'm however y'all want to do it, we can aim for that.
Mr. Mayor, if you could send it to us, at least we could be aware of what it is before the presentation is made.
Correct. So are y'all wanting the presentation virtually?
I'd just
and then
assume
just
receive
include it in the council packet?
send
or
us the
receive?
PDF of whatever you've got, throw it in the council packet, but I'm kind of with Mr. Saunders. I would just rather wait for a bigger presentation when we can actually be all in person and discuss it. But if you've got something you want to email out, that's simple enough to do.
I'll second that.
Okay, I'll email that to y'all.
If you send something out, please put it in the packet so the residents can see it also.
So you want it to go in the packet before it's presented to the council?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Just first opportunity when you're going to be sending it out.
That'll work. I can manage that. Was there any additional council member comments?
I assume we're going to have another virtual city council meeting in the next one.
That is the current goal. So I have spoke with the folks installing the audio visual. Our ordinances allow for a hybrid meeting. That's some people in person and some people digitally. The audio visual that we have in will not currently, without another $10,000 addition, allow us to use those video cameras as one of these entities in a Zoom call. So what we figured is if we're going to try and do a hybrid meeting, that anyone who was zooming in would just be zooming to my laptop and see me personally. At this point, in the City Hall renovation project, I think we'll hold off on the AV bridge necessary for the official way to conference call in. So I'll leave that up to the city council as to whether you would prefer to meet live and in person or virtually. What say y'all?
I prefer to do another virtual, I guess, if we're not entirely ready.
We would be ready for a full live city council meeting. So, and we could broadcast it. If we're talking about all the council members coming to the meeting, and no one zooming in, we can handle that. We can't handle a hybrid. And I know that there's some council members that have expressed a little more concern. So a hybrid meeting, I'm not recommending. We can either come and do it virtually, or we could come and do it all in person, whatever y'all prefer.
Can we accommodate the distancing with the audience if we do an in-person?
Well, that depends on the turnout. The goal when we go back live, and my goal I think would be to use our council chambers. We can't do the distancing in our council chambers for the council members. We can space out the chairs. The council room is bigger than it used to be, but if you get a large crowd of people, then no, we wouldn't be able to keep that distance, or we wouldn't be allowed to let all folks in.
I prefer to do it virtually until we get a little bit further down the road with this pandemic. And maybe listen a little bit more closely to what the governor recommends as far as we're still in phase 1. Phase 2 is supposed to start today, and he didn't start it today. So I would prefer that we do it virtually until we get a little bit further down the road.
I agree with that.
I agree with that also.
Seems like there's a consensus. Hang on a second. Hang on. Councilmember Holt, did I see your lips moving?
Yes, sir. I agree with that, sir.
Okay.
That's fine.
So we'll go ahead and I think we'll conclude just about every council meeting with this discussion and deliberation. We can always make that change when the time comes. Any additional council member comments? Councilmember Gardner, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank you and especially Scott Grummer for the work that he's been doing. There's been a number of residents in Maumelle Valley that have been affected by stormwater runoff. And I know Mr. Grummer has spent a significant amount of time over the last couple of weeks kind of digging into that and working with the engineers to develop a solution for that. And so I appreciate y'all's efforts on that. And I know especially the residents do, because they've been dealing with it for a pretty extensive period of time and with a lot of mud and water and rock coming across their property. So thank you all for taking the time to work on that so diligently. Appreciate it.
And the city attorneys chimed in that it has been an ongoing issue. This last week on Wednesday, we went out to 3 different sites that all had some sort of drainage issues, 3 very different projects. But Mr. Grummer has been sort of trying to unify some of the different departments focused on that particular issue, as it's a doozy. So thank you for that. Councilmember Tierney, did I see your hand up?
Yes, I'd like to thank Misters Matthews and Washroom for applying for the Civil Service Commission. It was a very difficult choice. They were all good candidates. There were no bad choices tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Saunders, is your hand up?
No, I raised it a while ago and you missed me, but I've already spoke.
Okay. Last call for council member comments. Madam City Attorney,
No city attorney comments this week.
are there any city clerk comments for Municipal Clerk Week?
Just letting you guys know, you may have noticed that I am sending your mail directly to you until we meet again in person. That's just so we don't store it and you guys don't miss it. So I'll be directing your mail that typically comes to City Hall to your home addresses. And some of you pick up your printed packets. The lobby is open, so you can pick those up as you would normally. You don't have to call in and request it first. It'll be ready for you. Once you receive the email, you can pick it up anytime after that. And that was all. And thank you all for recognizing Clerks Week.
Thank you. At this time, if there's no further business, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
All right.
Good night.